ultimately what we're doing for that client is what we're going to talk about today, is understanding how you can pretty much develop a similar structure for yourself and not have to worry about outsourcing too soon, because we understand the South Florida platform has a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, a lot of people still trying to figure it out, and we don't want this cost barrier to be something that stops you from getting started right away. So with that client, his name is Evan. He's developing a community around financial literacy for kids. He started off with a software app, but now he's coming up with a succession plan where the kids who graduate from that app can now go into the next stage of their life and start developing credit a lot sooner with a credit card. But you'll hear more about that when we launch that community. Tomorrow, I have my boy Andrew, another community that we're launching. He's actually having a media component combined with it called Planted Moves. You can visit his website at plantedmoves.com, but he's building a platform, a community that really focuses on leadership, spirituality, finances, and family. We got OTM, Off the Menu, on this side. Off the Menu, that's my boy Hector. And me, we're based out here in Houston. Houston is the #1 city for food, and we want to start creating a community for the people inside the industry to start connecting with each other, because right now they all work so much and they don't even understand that they all have a lot of things in common and really can start helping each other out and getting to that next level. But we're here for you to develop your brand, for you to develop your community. And so I do believe that communities are the future for digital marketing. I don't believe social media is dead, but I think that going forward, if you want to start creating real connections with people, we need to start having a platform to do that. But before we get there, we need to figure out the planning process. So before I want to get started with that, I want to go over what exactly is branding. So there are two different types of branding that we pretty much talk about around here. We have visible, which is your logo, your website, your fonts, your colors, all of those different things kind of go into the visible brand. Very tangible, very quantifiable. But then there's the invisible side of things. And that's just a way of saying, how do we combine your personality, your tone of voice, along with a strategy, so that way that you can communicate this in a digital format. And this is the best way to start thinking about how you want to build your community, because ultimately you want to make sure you have people in there that believe what you believe. Now, you know my background in hospitality. I bartended for 10 years. I worked in the creator economy for a couple years, and now I'm starting to see within this creator economy a lot of influencers and a lot of thought leaders are developing these hubs and ecosystems for people to not only learn more about the brand, but develop relationships with each other in a lateral way. So making sure that that invisible brand carries over into that community helps foster that environment that matches up with what you ultimately want your legacy to be. And speaking of legacy, one of the ways that we like to combine this whole process is what we call the invisible branding roadmap. We put a lot of these different components of invisible branding and we standardize it and we put it into a guide. So that way that whether our clients take us, they choose to keep us throughout the entire engagement as far as executing and managing our communities, or they want to hand it off to somebody internally, or they want to hand it off themselves, they have an opportunity to have this stuff physically and put these things on paper. One of the best things I ever did was I ended up writing a book about 3 months ago where I had a chance to document my whole entire bartending journey. And it was there that I realized, like, oh, wow, I have a community already that I need to be putting together, and which is ultimately how I ended up in Houston doing OTM. But one of the ways that we get this started, and this is something that you can do too, but this timeline that I'm about to talk about, this is something that you should do yourself. You should go in there and ask yourself these questions and actually write it down physically, what you were doing at each moment. So we start off 5 years ago. This is always a good place to start because this allows us to see exactly how you were looking and viewing the problem through that perspective. And then how did you go about getting that solution? How did you go about finding different ways to add and optimize the solution, team members, funding, all these different things that really are part of the story and part of the brand. And once you get a chance to put this stuff down and we're asking you questions along the way, or you're asking yourself questions, you get a chance to really surface up some very critical details that might have gotten lost in the process. And these details are actually the details that might end up allowing your brand to really connect with the target audience that you're looking for, that you may not have found yet, but you will after this process. From the 5 years ago, we transitioned into the now. This is an opportunity for us to dive into currently where your business or your brand is at. Who are you talking to? What platforms are you using? Who are your team members? What are the current amount of users that you have? And really just documenting this and really making sure that anytime we have to reflect back onto this, we have this information available in this guide. Next up, we go 5 years into the future. Some brands and businesses, especially if you're new, you haven't really thought that far ahead yet because you're straight in survival mode, but this is a great time for us to sit down and figure it out. Like, what are your projected amount of users? What additional products and services are you looking to add? And so that way, when you have our invisible branding, but we also know the products and services you want to add already right now, we can make sure that when you do launch those, it doesn't seem like it's coming out of left field. Next step, we go 10 years in the future. Typically, this is when founders and entrepreneurs start thinking about acquisition or succession. So a lot of times, nobody that's building these businesses nowadays was just like, I want to work 60 hours a week for 10 years straight. Not everybody. So it's like, once we start figuring out what that succession plan looks like, then bam, now we can even factor that into like a recruiting process. So that way now you can start finding people whose visions align with how you envision this brand or business unfolding. And lastly, we go 20 years in the future. This is a great time to start. This is when we start diving into this legacy. This is when we start figuring out exactly, okay, this was the whole plan all along. And with this information, now we can start building the brand that currently foreshadows what you want your legacy to be. So that's our timeline. That's documenting itself. Next, we use the information from this timeline. While we're all there, we're asking questions, we're reflecting on all this information, this 2-hour long process of how we went through all of this stuff, and we start building the core branding piece of this equation. And so that's finding the why. So finding the why, this is where we get a chance to really dive into why you want to solve the solution. Like we kind of talked about it with the 5 years ago, but now it's the real why directly. Why is this a problem? Why do you want to solve it? And then ultimately, that's when we really start uncovering what we think your purpose is and why we feel like you're the perfect fit for the solution. Next, finding out the how. So this is when we start diving a little bit deeper into operations, understanding how things work around a company, understanding what your plans are operationally to fix the solution, and then identifying the values. Understanding your core values are really just a great way to communicate your brand and make sure that people who really want to align with the things that you believe, they understand that you have these 4 to 5 hard line values that you don't stray away from. And once again, the timeline is so beneficial in finding these things and creating a separate document on these 3 categories right here. Next, we transition into brand communications. So now we're at the point of like, how do we communicate all of this purpose, is why, and these values? Well, first off, you need to identify what you want your personality to be. So we have a process where we kind of put you on a scale and start asking different questions. Like, do you want to be seen as a thought leader, or are you trying to be somebody that's entertaining? Do you want to be a rebel, or are you trying to be conventional? So we have a series of questions where we kind of feel like where you are on this sliding equation. And then from there, that's when we like, okay, now you can give this quantified version of what you want your brand personality to be and hand it over to a copywriter or something of that sort. So when you are building this for yourself, just kind of think about some polar opposites and putting them on a piece of paper, and then just kind of putting on that paper on each slider exactly where you envision yourself and how you want to be communicated. And then last, we have these 2 steps right here where I call this audience analysis. So you have 2 sides of the audience. You have the ideal customers and members, and then you also have the collaborators or partners. And so understanding who those people are, their gender, their age, demographic, their purchase patterns, all these type of things need to be documented. So that way, when you have somebody possibly running your social media or yourself, you know exactly how you can go out and find your customers' targets, figure out who they're following, or find the influencers or partners who can help you out along your mission. And then if you have that, now you can have your competitive analysis. Now you understand who your target audience is. Now you can find out who is serving that audience. And with the competitive analysis, this is when we start getting more into the market research, and this is when we start getting into community. So a part of this competitive analysis that you want to perform is called inner community research. This is when, honestly, you really can call this infiltration. This is when you get a chance to just hop up, head over to different competing communities, people serving similar niches as you across multiple platforms. And you want to make sure you try multiple platforms because your target audience might not be on Facebook groups. They might not be on Discord. They might be on a third-party app like Circle, or they might be on LinkedIn and groups, or they might be on Reddit. So finding where these things are, going in there, participating in the community is huge. Understanding exactly how the digital infrastructure is arranged, I think, is something that needs to be talked about, because a lot of these communities, the ones that have it right from an aesthetic standpoint, are doing something right. Whether you come in and you have access to the immediate feed where all the information is going or you're going straight into an announcement channel, or it's pure content area. But documenting exactly what's making these communities successful from a digital infrastructure side will help you along in developing your community. Make sure you assess the content volume. So how often are they posting? What are they posting? The variety. This is all information that you should be documenting, quantifying it, and making sure that you use that in your market analysis. Member engagement assessment. Find out exactly what are they doing to get members to be more active. Are they throwing events? Are they hosting webinars like this? Are they doing polls, quizzes, giveaways, contests? So taking all this in will help you and take a lot of stress off your plate when it comes to trying to figure out how can you get your members engaged. The member acquisition funnel. Everybody's going to be worried about how can I grow my community? How can I get people more involved? How can I get people over from this platform to this platform? Well, now that you have the competitors, you can see exactly how they're doing it. Are they partnering up with collaborators and influencers? Are they just posting TikToks and then diverting them to a YouTube, which is diverting them to a community? Are they doing webinars in front of other communities and making sure that the community that they have doesn't really compete directly with them, but they offer something that they can kind of do more of a service exchange for? So documenting what that acquisition funnel looks like helps you out a lot. I mean, there's even an opportunity where you can be running ads to let that be a KPI, people joining your community as a measure of ROI. And then a moderation assessment. This is another specific topic that's not talked about much, because how somebody moderates their community really can determine how you kind of steer this community towards products or services that you might want to offer. Some communities don't allow outside promo in there because they want to make sure they keep their community completely focused on what they have to offer. But then there's other communities where they only allow text. There's no pictures, no videos. It's just straight conversation. So monitoring how they're going about moderating that is going to help you when you start developing your own policies and guidelines. And this is a little sneaky right here, but go ahead, make a list of their most active members. Get their contact information. If they're active there, that means they are community active participants, and they could be very beneficial in being potential moderators or highly contributing members in your community. At the very least, they'll be able to give you potential feedback on what you can be doing better. But once you've kind of done that competitive analysis, you've done your community research, now you can start community mapping, or otherwise developing your own online community. So, of course, it starts with the digital infrastructure. And with the digital infrastructure, it also means picking the right platform. So with your analysis, you understand where your target audience like to hang out at. You want to meet them where they're at. But then from there, you start building on that platform, and then the structure of it compared to how you've been seeing competitors do it. And if you see that your competitors may have been lacking in some of that development, that's when you get a chance to plug in the hole, optimize, and offer these other communities an improvement opportunity. Growth and engagement strategy. This is something that you want to have in place before you actually launch a community, because once things get moving, you want to make sure that you always have continual engagement happening, so that way people never get bored and they don't forget you exist. One of the best ways to launch a community is with a live webinar or some type of live event. That way you get everybody's attention at one time, whether it be 10, 20, 30 people, get a chance to talk to them, get a chance to let them know exactly how things are going to work and what your plans and your vision are. And then from growth, you can have different strategies like giveaways, invite contests, just in real life physical events, and using your community as a way to keep everybody glued in between those physical events. Having a moderation procedure documented will also be helpful. Like I said, when you're creating those guidelines and policies, that'll really reflect how you want this invisible branding to work throughout this community. And you want to have all the stuff documented, because eventually you can load this stuff into a project management software, which allows you to pass this stuff off to somebody else, because this is a lot of work. If you're somebody who's running a business, who's trying to have a social media presence, trying to stay in shape, trying to see your family, and then I'm over here telling you, yeah, you need to operate a whole community, yeah, you need to operate a whole educational ecosystem, it's a lot of work. So as you're developing this stuff, go ahead, start loading this stuff into a project management system immediately, every little small task you're doing, so that way that as soon as you get things off the ground, you can hire somebody, whether that be a friend, family, or a community member, somebody who really could benefit from the community, could come in and take a load of this off your shoulders, and you're already prepared to do that with this system. So community management, it works on both sides. So like I said, online communities aren't replacing social media. They're just adding an additional layer to it. And so that's why I really think that what we're offering is a new age effort in digital marketing, because it's a whole side of management to the brand that people haven't really considered yet. So social media is really good for brand awareness. You got TikTok where they're showing your information to random strangers all the time. If you're looking to add new members to your community, you can reach out to the comments and other people's communities and bring them in. And once again, with the project management, you should be looking for staff also, people who believe what you believe, and then trying to figure out how you can get them to come work for you. If you look at Google, Apple, they were very adamant about how dope their working conditions were years ago, where people would just go to school and like, I want to work for those companies right there because of what the amenities and they offer and how they operate their brand. So you kind of want to start doing that for yourself as well, and it'll start allowing you to attract the top talent. But then you have the online ecosystem, which is the actual communities that we talk about here, and hosting those digital events, managing those, whether they be once a week. We have 2 this weekend. Just kind of putting these together, inviting everybody, integrating email campaigns to alert everybody, doing the community updates, keeping the conversation going. When your communities are young, you might not have everybody talking as much, so making sure you have a few people in there keeping the conversation going, because conversation is content in itself. When people join your community, they want to go in there and see, okay, this is the value that's being added here. I'll make sure I add this to my mindless scrolling at the end of the night. Customer support. And this is two-sided, whether that be your product and service, and making sure you get a chance to talk to people about how they are using and experiencing your product, or even with the community itself. Say they're having a hard time posting digital events or having access to different things, making sure you're able to handle the situation at that point right there. But overlapping both of those is the content. You got to be creating content on both sides of this. Sometimes the content can serve both sides at the same time. Other times you need to be creating content specifically for each side of the community management process. But this is a quick one. This is the roadmap right here. As you kind of can see what I've been through right here, the brand discovery timeline. That's when we get a chance to ask you what you've been doing 5 years ago up to 10, 20 years in the future. Taking your core branding is where we get a chance to find your purpose, your how, identify what your core values are. Your brand communications. This is an opportunity where we take the audience analysis, we figure out your personality, your tone of voice, and then we combine that with a competitive analysis. And those three are going to be its own document in itself that you should be either filling out yourself or hiring us to help you fill out. Next, we have our inner community research. This is when you get a chance to do community infiltration. This is where you go deep cover, find out what your competitors are doing, who are the most active members in those communities, how are they setting it up, how are they moderating it, how are they going about creating engagement, and adding that to your weapon belt. And then from there, community development. Now you're ready to start building your own community. Now that you've honestly been a part of other communities, you're ready to build your own because you know what's been missing and what you can bring to the table. And lastly, community management. After you have the building erected, it's time for you to start making sure that it's managed, the plumbing works, making sure everybody's happy, and making sure that you're optimizing to make sure everybody stays happy. But you can visit our website if you guys want to see a little bit more about how this process works and how we help people at any stage of this process, whether it be at the end, at the beginning, or the whole process over at communityisthebrand.com. And if you guys got questions, I'll be at Discord. Follow me on Instagram at John West Pitt. And that's it for me. I will see you guys at the top.